Pam Bondi believed she was stepping into a standard oversight session, just another day of formality and expected protocol. What she didn't realize was that Jasmine Crockett had come fully armed. Emails, timestamps, signed letters, and a strategy. Built not just to challenge, but to expose. The hearing room on Capitol Hill was calm that Tuesday morning, filled with the quiet hum of papers, microphones, and pre-written statements. But a different energy simmered beneath the surface. Jasmine Crockett, seated at the end of the committee table, sat still, no flipping through notes. No coffee sips, just steady focus aimed directly at Bondi. Pam Bondi, testifying under oath, delivered her statement smoothly. "I've had no direct communication with Westbridge Strategies or its affiliates in the last 12 months, she said confidently. Some committee members barely reacted. This sounded like a routine exchange. But Jasmine didn't move. She blinked slowly, waited, then leaned forward. "Miss Bondi," she began, voice calm but direct. "Could you repeat that last statement for the record?" Pam, with a practiced smile, obliged. Then silence. Jasmine stared at her a beat too long. The shift was subtle. Pam's posture tensed, her breath caught, and suddenly, the atmosphere in the room felt colder. "You're aware Westbridge Strategies is under federal investigation," Jasmine continued, referencing their role in an Oregon environmental contract. Pam nodded yes, she'd seen reports. But she maintained she hadn't communicated with the firm since last October. Jasmine opened a plain folder, nothing flashy. Just a manila cover with a sticky note. She read, "March 18th, 9:47 a.m. Hi Pam, just looping back with the revised talking points. Let us know if you're still comfortable pushing this at your Thursday appearance. Jeff, Westbridge Strategies." Pam froze. Jasmine asked if she recognized the email. No response. Holding up the printout, Jasmine stated clearly, "You." Replied 12 minutes later, "Looks good. I'll run it by Brian and confirm." Pam finally broke the silence. "I'd need to check my records," she said, voice uneven. No reaction from Jasmine. No smugness, just a steady presentation of facts. The timestamp is from a Westbridge domain. The sender is Jeff Rowell. Your response is on file. The hearing room was silent, still on edge. Pam attempted to recover. She claimed high email volume, possibly missing unsolicited messages, needing more context. Jasmine didn't argue. She simply nodded once. "Context is important," she said. "Let's make sure we get all of it." Pam tried humor. "Respectfully, Representative, this feels more like a cross-examination than oversight." Jasmine didn't blink. "Respectfully, Miss Bondi," she said, "when someone gives sworn testimony, accuracy isn't optional." And just like that, the entire tone of the hearing changed. When someone testifies before a congressional committee, and that testimony doesn't align with verified communication records, it's not a misunderstanding, it's a problem. Pam Bondi's confident expression tightened. The smirk was gone. Jasmine Crockett reached for a second document, her fingernails tapping softly against the table as she lifted it. April 6th, she read. Subject line, "Urgent Coordination, Governor's Office Talking Points. Sent by Westbridge. CCD to you and to staffers from your private consulting firm." Jasmine didn't wait for Pam to reply. "You responded with a PDF attachment. Metadata confirms it was sent from your device." The hearing room tensed. Jasmine clarified, "This isn't about memory. This is about accountability. You denied contact." Now we have timestamps, IP logs, and email threads showing not just contact, but active engagement. Pam's hand trembled as she reached for her water. The chairman leaned toward his mic. "Miss Bondi, would you like to respond?" She took a breath. "There may have been staff-level exchanges. I wasn't directly involved in all correspondence. Sometimes my name gets added without my review. Jasmine didn't miss a beat. "That's not what the message says," she said, calmly. "But..." Firmly, it reads, "Pam approved this version." Moving forward with her draft, her voice softened, but her precision remained. "You weren't copied in. You were coordinating it." The silence was heavy. Pam stared at the documents like they might combust on contact. Then another committee member interjected. "Madam Chair, perhaps we should review the full document thread before continuing this line of questioning." Jasmine stayed composed, happy to submit every page into the record. But the public deserves transparency in real time, not behind closed doors. There was no grandstanding. Jasmine wasn't performing. She was dismantling. Pam tried to pivot. "If you're suggesting I misled this committee," Jasmine cut in, her tone sharper now. "You're not being accused of dishonor, Miss Bondi. You're being asked to explain why your version of events keeps collapsing under the weight of hard evidence." Pam's gaze darted around the room, looking for someone, anyone, to step in. No one did. Behind her, aides whispered, flipping through folders. It was too late. Across the internet, clips of the exchange were already spreading. Pam, once the composed veteran, now looked like someone realizing the rules had changed. And she hadn't adapted. And the worst part was still to come. Jasmine let the silence breathe before picking up one last document, just 2 stapled pages. Nothing flashy, but crucial. May 2nd, 7:31 p.m., she said. Subject, briefing packet for Bondi's media run, sent from Brett Samuels at Westbridge. 4 items attached, including a cover letter from you to Representative Hauser of Oregon. Signed electronically using your DocuSign ID tied to your personal consulting account. Pam blinked. That... That wasn't part of my official work, she whispered, but you signed it. And sent it to his office 2 days later. Jasmine's voice never wavered. The timestamp on your email and the one in the congressional inbox, identical to the minute. Jasmine lifted the second page between her fingers like it was a final piece of evidence on display. There's a handwritten note scanned. And attached to the draft, she said. In the margin, it reads, "Make sure Crockett never sees this." Underlined twice. A visible wave of disbelief swept the room, whispered murmurs, shifting seats. Pam's face drained of color. Jasmine asked, "You don't remember sending that? Signing that? Writing that note?" Pam's voice cracked. I don't recall." You don't recall telling your staff to conceal information from a sitting member of Congress actively involved in this investigation? I never said. Your initials, Jasmine said, leaning forward, are next to the note. Silence returned. The kind that didn't demand an answer, because the truth was already on the table. Would you like to amend your statement? Jasmine asked. Pam sat still, her hands limp in her lap. No answer. Jasmine turned to the chairman. For the record, we now have 3 separate communications that show a pattern. Denial of contact. With Westbridge, coordination of talking points submitted under Ms. Bondi's name. A direct instruction to withhold materials from this committee. No yelling, no theatrics. Just truth documented, time-stamped, and undeniable. In the context of a congressional review, the chairman gave a slow, reluctant nod. All documents will be entered into the record, he said. Jasmine quietly folded the papers and placed them neatly back into the folder. Pam Bondi still hadn't spoken. Her hand lay flat on the table, palm down like she needed something solid to hold on to. One of her aides leaned forward to whisper, but Pam gently raised her hand, signaling, not now. She looked at Jasmine again. There was no defiance. Left in her face, only exhaustion. Jasmine didn't gloat, didn't press her advantage. She simply met her eyes and said, calm and steady, truth has a way of catching up, even when people think it won't. A reporter in the press row typed those words out verbatim. They'd be circulating online within the hour. Pam straightened in her chair and finally broke her silence. "I need a recess," she said, her voice low. The chairman glanced toward legal counsel, uncertain. The room held still. Pam repeated herself, louder this time. 5 minutes. There was no objection. The gavel tapped once. 5-minute recess granted. Pam rose slowly, as if the weight of the moment had turned even gravity against her. She walked out, her heels clicking sharply down the hall. Cameras followed. The scene was no longer confined to the hearing room. It had become a national moment. Back inside, Jasmine sat back in her chair and exhaled, the first breath she'd truly taken in what felt like hours. There was no trace of victory on her face, just focus. This wasn't finished, but outside, the story was already burning through news feeds. When Pam Bondi stepped into the hallway, she didn't make a statement. She didn't look up. 2 staffers flanked her, guiding her through the crowd of shouting reporters. A security officer gently moved people back. She said nothing. Inside, silence held. No murmuring, no tapping keyboards, no sidebar chats. Jasmine sat still, calm, the folder of evidence now closed and resting beside her elbow. The chairman leaned toward his mic. "We'll resume when the witness returns. I advise all members to remain present." No one moved. Representative Glenn Valerio, seated a few chairs down, leaned toward Jasmine and whispered, "Did you know about the DocuSign attachment before this morning?" Without looking over, she replied, "Got confirmation at 8 a.m. He exhaled. Slowly, "That explains the folder." She turned slightly. "It's not about the folder. It's about telling the truth when people think no one's watching." Valerio gave a subtle nod. Across the room, Carla Nunes, political correspondent for the Des Moines Standard, reviewed her tweet thread. Over a dozen live posts in under 20 minutes, each spreading like wildfire. But one tweet, just 10 words, was leading the charge. "Make sure Crockett never sees this." Pam Bondi's handwritten note. It had already been retweeted over 40,000 times. People were tagging journalists, legal analysts, elected officials, even Jasmine herself. But Jasmine hadn't looked at her phone once. She was watching the door. 5 minutes passed, then 8. Still no sign of Bondi. The tension didn't fade. It thickened. Finally, one of Pam's aides returned and leaned in to whisper to the chairman. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and tapped the gavel again. "The committee has received a request from Miss Bondi's counsel," he announced. "They are requesting a delay in testimony to allow legal review of the new evidence." A wave of murmurs swept the room. Before anyone else could respond, Jasmine spoke. "Mr. Chairman, this committee operated under the assumption that Ms. Bondi had adequately prepared for today's hearing. These communications weren't concealed. They existed in open, accessible channels. It is not this committee's burden to wait for someone to check their inbox." The chairman nodded slightly, tension visible in his expression. "I agree in principle, Representative. However, legal procedure requires understood." Jasmine cut in smoothly. "But let the record reflect, the moment the truth came out, she left." A beat of silence followed. Then, a single clap echoed from somewhere in the chamber. Before quiet fell again, no one turned to see who started it, but the point had landed. Looking visibly unsettled, the chairman cleared his throat. "This hearing is now in recess pending further legal review. Members will be notified when we reconvene." He stood quickly and exited the chamber. The press didn't. Neither did the cameras. Jasmine finally reached for her phone. Dozens of missed calls, a flood of texts from reporters, aides, and family. But it was the pinned message that made her pause. From Mom, 10 minutes ago. "Proud of you. But watch your back. People hate the truth." She locked the screen and stood, tucking the folder under her arm as she made her way to the side exit. Reporters called out, trying to get her attention. She didn't respond until one voice cut through. "Representative Crockett, were you expecting the email with the handwritten note?" She stopped, turned, and met the reporter's eyes. "No," she said, "and I wasn't expecting to be lied to either." Then she walked out. As Jasmine stepped into the sunlight, phones lit up across the plaza. What had started as a single document was now dominating national headlines. Inside the marble halls of the Cannon House office building, things weren't calming down. They were escalating. Recorders rolled, cameras snapped, notepads filled. Everyone wanted a piece of the moment. But down a quiet hallway, inside a private anteroom, Pam Bondi sat with her legal team in near silence. Her lead counsel, Daniel Ryston, slowly flipped through the printouts Jasmine had entered into the record. His red pen circled the same phrase again and again, as though repetition could dull its impact. "Make sure Crockett never sees this." The note, the DocuSign, the timestamp, the metadata trail. None of it appeared forged or manipulated. It all looked damning and authentic. Pam sat slouched in a chair, her navy blazer wrinkled, her camera-ready makeup cracking under the pressure. "Can we spin this?" she asked softly. Ryston didn't respond immediately. He kept staring at the margin note. "We can try," he said at last, without conviction. "Say you didn't know it was attached. Blame a staffer. Deny the handwriting." Pam let out a dry laugh. "That won't work. Jasmine saw through me the moment I sat down." Ryston paused. "Then we buy time. Delay things. Paint the committee as unfair." Pam stood and walked toward the frosted glass window, arms folded, facing her reflection, but what she saw was the edge of a cliff. Across the building, Jasmine sat cross-legged in her office chair, laptop open, her team moving quickly around. Her answering press, checking procedures, scanning statutes. But she stayed locked on one thing. The follow-up? She knew leadership would urge her to wait, to hold back until Bondi's lawyers responded. But the public wasn't asking for patience. They were asking for accountability. Tamika Greer, one of Jasmine's senior aides, knocked lightly on the door. "Jazz," she said, "you're trending in 13 states. Without looking up, Jasmine replied, "It's not about trending." "I know," Tamika said, stepping inside. "But this is a moment. And moments become momentum." Jasmine finally looked up. "Tell me how bad the backlash is." Tamika sighed. "Bondi's team is already crying ambush, saying you hit her with private emails. They're pushing it to right-wing media first." Jasmine closed her laptop with a snap. "They always do." Tamika hesitated. Repronhauser's office reached out to he's distancing himself, claims he never saw the letter. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. Odd, his staff signed for it. Bondi's assistant dropped it off. Tamika nodded. "We've got the front desk video, time-stamped." A faint smile tugged at Jasmine's lips, but it was cold. "That'll matter." Back in the anteroom, Rystone was on the phone with the committee clerk. "Yes," he said. "Ms. Bondi is willing to return to the hearing, but only after reviewing all submitted evidence in full. We'd also like clarification on the scope of future questioning." The clerk's voice came back, curt and unsympathetic. "Request noted. Request denied." The session wouldn't be softened or postponed. Pam Bondi would have to answer for what had already been entered into the official record. When Ryston ended the call with the committee clerk, he turned to Pam. "They're not giving you a pass." Pam sat down slowly. "Then we stall." Back in the hearing room, the few remaining journalists were already filing live updates. Carla Nunez typed quickly, her focus sharpened by the silence. In her latest draft, she wrote, at 10:19 a.m., Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett did more than question a former Attorney General Shea dismantled a decade-old narrative built on influence and immunity. At 10 a.m., Pam Bondi's legal team had sent an official letter to the committee requesting a postponement, citing newly submitted evidence and insufficient time to review. The chair had accepted it with an expression that suggested he'd seen it coming. When the letter was read aloud to the committee, Jasmine sat motionless, arms folded. "She's not coming back today," the chairman announced. Jasmine didn't reply. She didn't need to. She simply picked up her folder and walked out. But while the committee paused, the outside world did not. The footage from the session had already gone viral, clipped, quoted, and shared at a pace no one inside could control. Carla had covered dozens of congressional hearings over the years, most procedural, careful, and forgettable. She was used to reading between the lines, decoding rehearsed testimony, and dodged questions. But this was different. There was no spin to untangle, no code to crack. It was direct, raw, real by the time she returned to the Des Moines Standard's Washington office. She had over 300 clips, quotes, and still images. But one line haunted her more than anything else. "Make sure Crockett never sees this." It wasn't just incriminating, it was deeply human. It showed fear, and people felt that Anthony Collins, her editor, stood behind her as she scrubbed through raw footage. Did she know about the note ahead of time? Carla shook her head. No. When the earlier emails came up, she barely reacted. But when she flipped to that last page, something changed. Anthony nodded slowly. CNN and MSNBC are calling. Even NPR. They want our footage. They'll wait, Carla said. We're running the story first. This one matters. She opened a new draft and began writing, not with buzzwords, but with what she saw. Crockett didn't come to perform. She came to expose the truth. And when truth is presented clearly, it doesn't need volume, it echoes on its own. Outside, cable news split the screen. Jasmine reading from the folder on one side, Bondi's stunned face on the other. The ticker read, Bondi accused of misleading Congress. Crockett presents evidence live. A 40-second clip titled, She Wasn't Ready for This had already surpassed 3 million views. It showed Jasmine calmly turning to the final page and zoomed in on Bondi's frozen expression. Even international headlines picked it up. The Toronto Post read, U.S. oversight hearing turns explosive former ag caught in document scandal. Carla scrolled past a side-by-side image. Bondi, smiling from a TV interview 6 months ago. Next to a still of her silenced in the hearing room. Caption, lying is easy until someone brings the receipts. She leaned back. This wasn't just a headline, it was a shift. Something had cracked in the long-standing narrative around oversight hearings, often dismissed as political theater. This wasn't theater. This was accountability with teeth and clarity. Her phone buzzed, a text from her oversight committee source. There's talk of a subpoena. She may be forced to return, Carla texted back. Will Crockett lead the questioning? Again. The reply came instantly. You better believe it. She smiled, then returned to her draft. Crockett's precision didn't just expose contradictions. It shattered the illusion that certain people are too connected or too protected to face real questions. She reread the sentence and nodded. Then her phone rang. It was a producer from Good Morning America. Miss Nunez, are you available for a live segment tomorrow? Your reporting's already been cited on 3 networks. Carla glanced at her notes. Sure, she said. I'm not here to sell. A viral moment. A pause. I'm here to explain why it mattered. The producer replied, that's exactly what we want. While the news cycle sprinted ahead, Jasmine Crockett remained silent. Since walking out of the hearing room, she hadn't spoken a word, not to the press, not on social media. And the silence only fueled more speculation. By noon, it was no. Longer just trending it was dominating. Every major outlet had seized on the story. Opinion columns poured in. TV panels debated its implications. And pundits analyzed Jasmine's questioning style like it was a masterclass in strategy. Some compared her to a prosecutor. Others to a surgeon. But online, there was no debate. Only celebration. Hashtags flooded timelines. Hashtag Crockett exposed it. Hashtag Pam got pressed. Hashtag that folder. Meme accounts turned the moment into instant pop culture. Reaction GIFs. Audio remixes. One viral TikTok synced Jasmine's calm reading of the explosive email to a beat drop. Captioned, "When the group chat receipts hit midlife." It had 6 million views before lunch. Meanwhile, Jasmine was sitting in a quiet cafe just 3 blocks from the Capitol. Tucked into a booth, phone face down, she stared out the window, deep in thought. No tweets. No interviews. Just space to breathe. Tamika slid into the booth across from her, grinning. "You've been turned into a reaction GIF," she said. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "That better not mean what I think it means. It means you're everywhere. Clips, quotes, edits, memes. I just saw 3 versions of you flipping that last page." Like it was a courtroom drama finale. Jasmine shook her head, eyes back on the street. "It was supposed to be a hearing, not a performance." "You didn't make it a performance," Tamika replied. "You made it surgical. That's why it hit." She pulled out her tablet. Check. This out. The Boston Ledger ran an op-ed this morning. Crockett's refusal to let the moment dissolve into ambiguity showed us what accountability looks like when someone refuses to be intimidated. Jasmine read the quote, then slid the tablet back. "Good words," she said quietly. "But they won't stop what's coming." "You expecting blowback?" Tamika asked. Jasmine nodded. "Always comes. They'll call it a witch hunt. Say I'm bitter. Say I'm putting on a show. Say I'm aggressive." Tamika didn't flinch. "Let them. The tape is the tape." Back on Capitol Hill, Bondi's allies were already scrambling. An anonymous source from her camp gave a quote to the Baltimore Chronicle. Pam was ambushed. Representative Crockett had access to documents Bondi never saw. This wasn't about truth, was theater. But that spin wasn't landing. The clips were unedited. The documents were real. And the timeline was airtight. No excuse could erase the footage of Pam Bondi freezing as her own words were read back to her by someone unshaken, unbothered, and fully prepared. Across the country, people were tuning in not just for the drama, but because they were tired. Tired of watching the powerful avoid consequences. Tired of hollow hearings and empty gestures. Tired of polite evasions packaged as accountability. Jasmine hadn't yelled. She hadn't insulted. She asked the right question, and she brought the receipts, and that made her harder to discredit. Back at the cafe, her phone buzzed again. A Esteban Woodley, chair of the subcommittee. She answered, "Esteban." His voice came warm, but measured. "Hell of a thing you did in there. Just wanted to say that. Appreciate it." "Well," he sighed, "we've got a procedural storm now. Bondi's team is asking for an official delay, wants time to comb through every document before she comes back." "Of course they do. You'll be leading again. That all right with you?" She didn't even blink. "It's necessary." There was a pause. "You good?" Jasmine looked out the window. Pedestrians passed with faces lit by phone screens, some pausing to scroll, some laughing softly at something they saw. "I'm fine," she said. "I just didn't expect holding someone accountable to echo this loudly." Esteban chuckled. "Sometimes the truth does that, but louder than any trending tag or viral clip was the question now growing across the country. If Pam Bondi lied about this, what else has she lied about? By the time Pam Bondi made her first public appearance, nearly 24 hours had passed. Her silence had only fed the fire. The longer she stayed quiet, the more the story grew on screens, in headlines, and across every timeline. She stepped up too. A podium in a small conference room at a D.C. hotel. Not Capitol Hill, not an official press briefing. Just a controlled setting with friendly faces and a curated list of reporters. Her hair was freshly styled, her blazer meticulously chosen. But the fatigue around her eyes was harder to conceal. "I want to be clear," she began, her voice steadier than the day before, though lacking its usual polish. "The narrative that's being pushed is misleading." These were complex communications, involving multiple staff members across various platforms. "I was not given sufficient time to prepare for the content presented yesterday." No apology, no retraction, just deflection. A reporter from the Kansas Free Press raised his hand. "Do you deny signing the May 2nd letter to Representative Hauser?" Pam blinked. "I do not recall that specific letter, and until my legal team finishes their review, I won't speculate." Another hand. "What about the handwritten margin note? Make sure Crockett never sees this." She swallowed. "Oh. That note was not written by me. We're still investigating how it became attached to that document." Despite the confident delivery, her words fell flat. The footage from the hearing was too fresh, the documents too damning. Public opinion had already formed on it wasn't in her favor. At the Des Moines Standard, journalist Carla Nunes watched the press conference from her laptop, a steaming mug beside her. She paused and rewound to Bondi's denial. Zoomed in. Frame by frame. Pam's eyes flicked right after the question. Her jaw moved just before she answered. Carla jotted a note. Micro-expression shift discomfort. She saved the clip, already thinking about a forensic analysis piece. Back in her office, Jasmine Crockett was reviewing new evidence. Overnight, Tamika had arrived with more documentation. "We've got email headers from a Hill source," she said, handing over a file. Bondi's assistant dropped off that packet. "It matches the date on the cover letter." "Good," Jasmine replied. "We'll submit it to the committee." Her eyes drifted to the whiteboard across the room, now dense with names, dates, and timelines. Every claim Bondi made during the hearing and every piece of correspondence that contradicted her. Tamika pointed to a gap. "We're still missing confirmation on the April 14th meeting." "The one in Louisville?" Jasmine asked. "Yeah. Word is she met with Westbridge reps off record." Hotel staffer reached out anonymously. They recognized her. "If that meeting happened," Jasmine said, "that's another ethics violation. Possibly worse." Online, Bondi's press conference only made things worse. A clip of her saying, "I don't recall the specific letter," was already being stitched next to the signed document in viral posts. One user captioned a 3-frame meme. "Yesterday, I've had no contact. Today, I don't recall. Tomorrow, gum in Congress on the Hill." Reporters surrounded Representative Esteban Woodley. "She's stalling," he said bluntly. She had a chance to speak under oath. She didn't take it. "Now we're cleaning up the fallout. It's a perjury investigation on the table," a journalist asked. "That's being reviewed. We're initiating a formal process. And yes, Representative Crockett will be leading the next round." By day's end, Bondi's attempt to control the narrative had been dismantled. Meme by meme, fact by fact. In her legal office, crisis PR calls came in rapid succession. Risden paced as a speakerphone voice echoed across the room. "She should have admitted something," the strategist said. "Anything." The denial made her look worse. Pam sat motionless, arms crossed, eyes locked on the muted TV screen. It showed Jasmine Crockett mid-question, folder in hand, captioned, "The woman who cornered the former attorney general." But it wasn't just a corner. Jasmine had constructed a box out of paper trails and public records. Coup, and Pam had walked right into it. 2 days after the hearing, the committee room sat empty, but the aftershocks were still spreading. In a rare bipartisan decision, The Oversight Subcommittee formally requested the House Ethics Office review Bondi's testimony. The vote: unanimous. Even members who typically opposed Jasmine politically couldn't ignore what had happened. The documents were real. The contradictions were blatant. And the cleanup had only deepened the mess inside a Capitol press room. Esteban Woodley faced a sea of microphones. "This isn't theater," he said, tapping the podium. "We're talking about someone who once served as her state's top legal officer, knowingly giving false testimony and misleading the public." He paused, and it took someone with a folder and a steady hand to bring it to light. Reporters scrambled to file stories, but the most obvious question, the one hanging in the air, remained unasked, because the answer had already become clear. Everyone knew who the silence was about. Jasmine Crockett hadn't said a word publicly since the hearing. No interviews, no TV appearances, no social media threads. She let the facts speak for themselves. Still, her words were being quoted everywhere. In classrooms, on podcasts, at legal symposiums. A short clip of her saying, "Truth has a way of catching up even when people think it won't," had found its way into ethics lectures at Stanford Law. One professor used her line of questioning as a case study on evidence-based interrogation. In a high school in Wichita Falls, Texas, a teenage girl raised her hand after watching the video and asked, "Why don't more people do what she did?" Her teacher simply said, "Because it's hard. But now they might." Meanwhile, Pam Bondi's world was closing in. Invitations disappeared. A Cleveland legal conference quietly removed her from the speaker lineup. 2 firms she had consulted for issued statements, creating distance. Inside her Arlington condo, Bondi sat flipping through news coverage journal. Every segment, the tone, the same. This wasn't looking good. An unopened envelope from the House Ethics Office sat on her counter. The weight of what was inside said more than the paper could. Her phone buzzed. A voicemail. It was her father's voice. Warm, but worn. "Pammy, maybe it's time to let go of all the noise. Just be honest." That's what your mother would have said. She didn't replay it. She held the phone to her chest in silence. Back in Jasmine Crockett's office, the mood was calm. No press waiting outside. No urgent rush. Just focused work. She stood at the window, watching a small student group walk by. Tamika walked in, handing her a folder thicker than the last. "We got full email threads from April 14th, she said. "Security footage confirms it. Bondi was there. Westbridge's lead rep. 2 lobbyists too." Jasmine flipped through the documents. "Undisclosed coordination on federal policy," she said. "Off the books," Tamika nodded. "They didn't. Forget a form, they avoided one." Jasmine sighed. "I didn't expect it to lead here." Tamika leaned against the wall. "People rarely do. But the evidence tells the story. You were just the one willing to say it out loud." Outside, the sky looked heavy. Not rain, just that strange quiet before something breaks. Jasmine said nothing. She closed the folder and set it on her desk, while Bondi's career dimmed. Jasmine's was becoming more than a rise. It was a recalibration of what political courage could look like. 3 weeks after the hearing, the story hadn't died. The clip of Jasmine calmly revealing Bondi's contradictions had become something else. Teachers were playing it in schools. Activists quoted it at protests. Comedians joked, if receipts were a sport, Jasmine just won gold. But for Jasmine, it was never about headlines. Not even about Bondi. It was about accountability and what people assume they can get away with when no one's watching. One Sunday, Jasmine sat for a single interview. Not on cable. Not on a major network. Just her in a community hall with folding chairs and lukewarm coffee, speaking with a local journalist named Kara Levinson. "Why now?" Kara asked. "Why break your silence here?" Jasmine gave a small shrug. The truth doesn't need an echo chamber. It just needs daylight. Kara smiled. A lot of people, especially young people, watched you. They saw something they hadn't seen in politics before, that it could matter. Jasmine looked down at her hands. I wasn't trying to make a moment. I asked questions. I listened. When the answers didn't fit the facts, I kept going. That's not heroic. That's the job. But you made it look easy. Jasmine smiled. Tired. It wasn't. It's never easy. You're not just challenging one pursuer going against a system that protects them, and half the room is hoping you'll fail. Kara leaned in. What went through your head when you saw that note, the one that said, "Make sure Crockett never sees this"? Jasmine paused. It felt like they didn't see me as a peer. Not even as a member of Congress. Just a problem. She looked up. That's when I knew I was doing something right. That line, "They saw me as a problem." That's when I knew I was doing something right. Spread across social media again. But this time, it wasn't about scandal. It was about recognition. It struck a chord with anyone who'd ever been underestimated or told to stay in their lane. That same week, Bondi's legal team issued a final statement. No apology. No admission, just more evasion and then silence. Her consulting firms. Website went offline. No appearances, no op-eds. The scandal faded not because it was forgotten, but because it was undeniable. Meanwhile, Jasmine's office received over 2,000 letters. Law students, judges, regular citizens. One note from a woman in Kansas City read, "Watching you stand firm gave me the courage to speak up in my own life." Not everyone's lie plays out in Congress, but the truth matters everywhere. Jasmine kept that one in her drawer. At the next committee hearing, Jasmine walked in without a folder, but with the same sharp, quiet presence. A few heads turned. A few nodded. The chair welcomed her back. Good to have you. No headline followed. No viral soundbite. Just real work, the kind that doesn't trend but still changes things, because the truth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits, obvious, steady, and undeniable, waiting for someone like Jasmine Crockett to say, "Let's talk about this." And if there's anything this story proves, it's this. Systems of power don't collapse in a single moment. They crack testimony by testimony, document by document. And all it takes to widen that crack is one person who refuses to look away. If this story moved you, it made you think, or reminded you that truth matters, stick around. Because the truth isn't gone. It's just waiting to be picked up again.